Hey guys, tonight we're stepping back, way back, to a time when spiritual enlightenment came at an unbelievably steep price. Forget your comfortable meditation cushions and climate-controlled yoga studios. We're talking about the Silk Road, that ancient, treacherous network of trade routes, and what it really felt like to be a Buddhist monk, traversing its unforgiving expanse. Imagine the biting desert winds, the dizzying mountain passes, the constant gnawing hunger, and the ever-present threat of, well, everything. This wasn't some serene pilgrimage. It was an endurance test, a brutal commitment that few modern seekers could even fathom. You think your morning commute is tough? Try 1,000 miles on foot, with nothing but a begging bowl and a prayer. This journey wasn't for the faint of heart, or for anyone who preferred a warm meal and a soft bed. You'd likely not survive the first month. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know where you're listening from, and what time it is for you right now in the comments below. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You stand on the edge of the known world, or at least what you know of it. The wind, a constant, irritating companion, whips dust into your face, stinging your eyes and coating your tongue with a gritty film. This isn't the gentle breeze of your monastery garden. This is the breath of the desert, vast and indifferent. You clutch your simple staff, its smooth wood worn by countless hands, and adjust the coarse fabric of your robes. They offer little protection against the morning chill, which bites deep into your bones despite the rising sun. You've walked for weeks, maybe months, the rhythm of your sandals on the dusty track a hypnotic mantra. Each step is a conscious act, a deliberate movement of faith and sheer will. The journey began with fervent vows, with the intoxicating promise of deeper understanding, of bringing the Dharma to new lands. You imagined serene meditations under exotic trees, scholarly debates with wise sages, and the respectful awe of new converts. The reality far grittier. The very air you breathe is a constant reminder of the brutal physical demands. Your lungs burn from the fine particulate matter, a mix of sand, dried animal dung, and whatever else the wind decides to pick up. Every cough reverberates through your chest, a dull ache that settles in your ribs. Hydration is a luxury, not a given. Your water skin, made of cured animal hide, tastes faintly of its former occupant, a metallic tang that never quite leaves your mouth. You ration every drop, knowing that the next oasis could be a day, 2 days, even more. Away. The sun, when it finally crests the horizon, doesn't bring warmth. It brings an oppressive, relentless heat that drains your energy faster than you can replenish it. You learn to walk with your head bowed, eyes scanning the horizon for any hint of shade, any whisper of a cloud. The concept of a road here is a generous interpretation. Often, it's just a faint trail, a series of footprints left by those who came before you, merchants, soldiers, other weary pilgrims. Sometimes, the path disappears altogether, swallowed by shifting dunes or obscured by rockfalls. You rely on instinct, on the faint memory of conversations with grizzled caravanners, and on the occasional cairn built by a desperate soul. The landscape itself is a cruel master. Jagged, snow-capped peaks loom in the distance, promising freezing temperatures and treacherous passes. Below them, vast, desolate plains stretch out, seemingly without end, where the only movement is the shimmer of heat haze and the occasional tumbleweed. Then there are the companions of the road, not always human. You become intimately familiar with the scorpions that scuttle across the rocks, the venomous snakes that sun themselves on warm stones, and the predatory birds that circle overhead, patiently waiting for something, or someone to falter. You learn to sleep lightly, one ear always attuned to the rustle of dry grass, the distant howl of a wolf, or the more immediate, terrifying sound of approaching hooves. Bandits were a very real threat, a constant shadow lurking in the canyons and passes. These weren't just common thieves. They were often organized gangs, sometimes even disgruntled former soldiers, who saw the Silk Road as their personal hunting ground. A lone monk, even one with little material wealth, was an easy target for his robes, his begging bowl, or simply the perverse pleasure of asserting dominance. You carry no weapon, your vows forbidding it, leaving you utterly defenseless save for your wits and, perhaps, the hope of divine intervention. Some historians still debate whether the perceived threat of bandits was truly as widespread as accounts suggest, or if it was amplified by fearful travelers to discourage competition. Disease is an invisible enemy, far more insidious than any bandit. A simple cut can fester, turning into a debilitating infection in the dust and grime. Dysentery is a common companion, its debilitating grip weakening you with each bout, leaving you dehydrated and vulnerable. You see fellow travelers, even other monks, succumb to fevers that leave them delirious, their bodies racked with chills, eventually collapsing into the sand. There are no doctors, no pharmacies, just the knowledge passed down through generations of herbal remedies, often ineffective against the virulent strains of unfamiliar pathogens. You learn to recognize the subtle signs of sickness in yourself, the metallic taste of an oncoming fever, the dull ache in your joints, and you pray. You pray with a fervent desperation that you never knew you possessed in the quiet halls of your monastery. The mental toll is just as heavy, if not heavier, than the physical. Loneliness is a constant companion. While you might occasionally join a caravan for safety, much of your journey is undertaken in solitary contemplation. Days bleed into weeks, weeks into months, without a single meaningful conversation, without the comforting presence of familiar faces. The vastness of the landscape amplifies this feeling, making you feel infinitesimally small and insignificant. You crave human connection, the simple act of sharing a meal or a story, but such moments are fleeting. This isolation, while perhaps conducive to introspection for some, can also lead to a gnawing doubt, a slow erosion of purpose. You question your vows, your path, even the very dharma you seek to propagate. Was this truly the way? Was the suffering worth the promised enlightenment? These thoughts, insidious and persistent, creep into your mind during the long, silent hours of walking. And then there's the food, or lack thereof. Your begging bowl is your lifeline. You rely entirely on the generosity of strangers, and generosity on the Silk Road is often a scarce commodity. You might go days without a proper meal, subsisting on dried fruit, stale bread, or whatever meager scraps a sympathetic farmer or merchant might offer. The diet is monotonous, lacking in essential nutrients, and often contaminated. You dream of fresh vegetables, of a hot, savory stew, but these are luxuries you rarely encounter. You learn to quiet the rumbling in your stomach, to push past the gnawing hunger, transforming it into another form of ascetic practice. Every calorie is precious, every morsel a blessing. The taste of dust, salt, and desperation becomes strangely familiar. Sleep offers little respite. You often bed down under the open sky, the cold desert floor your mattress, a few thin robes your only blanket. The night air, even after a scorching day, can drop to freezing temperatures, forcing you to huddle for warmth, to shiver through the long hours until dawn. The stars, brilliant and countless in the unpolluted night sky, offer a dazzling spectacle, but they also highlight your vulnerability, your exposed position in the vast, unforgiving wilderness. You are constantly on guard, even in your sleep, your senses tuned to the slightest disturbance. The luxury of a deep, uninterrupted slumber is a distant memory. Even the most mundane tasks become Herculean efforts. Finding clean water, collecting firewood in a treeless landscape, mending your worn robes, each requires significant time and energy that you barely possess. You become a master of improvisation, using whatever materials are at hand to survive. A torn robe might be patched with a scrap of merchant silk, a broken staff mended with strong vines. This constant struggle for basic survival leaves little room for the spiritual contemplation you ostensibly embarked on this journey for. The Dharma, in these moments, feels abstract, distant, a philosophical concept dwarfed by the immediate, overwhelming demands of the body. This is the raw, unvarnished truth of the Silk Road monk, a constant battle against the elements, against hunger, against disease, against fear, and perhaps most importantly, against the insidious whispers of doubt in your own mind. You occasionally encounter small Buddhist communities, tiny outposts of faith clinging to the edges of the desert. These moments offer brief solace, a chance to rest, to share stories, to partake in communal chanting. But even here, life is austere. The monasteries are often carved into cliff faces or built from rough-hewn stone, simple and Spartan. The food, while perhaps more regular, is still basic. You might find a small library of sutras, painstakingly copied by hand, and for a short time, you can immerse yourself in the sacred texts, a welcome intellectual balm after weeks of physical hardship. Yet, these oases are temporary. The road calls, the mission pushes you onward, and soon you find yourself once again facing the vast emptiness, the relentless wind, and the silent, ever-present challenge of survival. The truth is, the very act of existing on the Silk Road was a profound act of devotion, a daily, tangible expression of your commitment to the Dharma, far more visceral than any formal ritual. You are living the path, not just meditating upon it. You continue your trek, each step a testament to a willpower you never knew you possessed. The physical agony, once a sharp, insistent pang, has dulled into a constant, pervasive hum beneath your consciousness. This is the agony of asceticism, the bedrock of your monastic life, amplified to an almost unbearable degree on the Silk Road. It's not just about foregoing luxuries. It's about actively embracing discomfort, pushing your body past its perceived limits, and finding spiritual liberation in the crucible of deprivation. You remember the teachings, the scriptures that spoke of transcending the physical. But here, on this desolate path, those words take on a visceral, undeniable truth. Your robes, once a symbol of your dedication, are now a torment. The coarse wool scratches against your skin, chafing where the dust has worked its way into the fibers. In the heat of the day, they cling, trapping sweat and dirt, creating a suffocating layer. In the frigid nights, they offer meager warmth, forcing you to shiver uncontrollably, your teeth chattering a rhythm against the vast silence. You don't have the luxury of changing them. This single set of robes is your worldly possession, and it must endure the journey as much as you do. The smell of accumulated sweat, dust, and dried mud is a constant, faint aroma that you've long since ceased to notice, becoming as much a part of you as your skin. Food, when you find it, is rarely satisfying. You practice pindapata, the alms round, extending your begging bowl to any passerby or villager you encounter. This act, meant to foster humility and reliance on the generosity of others, is often met with indifference, suspicion, or even hostility. Some villagers, wary of strangers or simply too poor themselves, turn away. Merchants, concerned with their valuable cargo, might offer a dismissive wave. When an offering does come, it's typically a handful of dried millet, a few stale dates, or a piece of hard, unleavened bread. You eat it slowly, savoring every crumb, chewing deliberately to extract every last bit of sustenance. There's no spice, no flavor beyond the raw, earthy taste of survival. You learn to ignore the gnawing emptiness in your stomach, transforming it into a meditative practice, focusing on the sensation of hunger itself, watching it rise and fall, attempting to detach from its demands. It's a cruel irony you sought spiritual insight through detachment from worldly desires, and the road forces a detachment from even basic comfort. Sleep is a fleeting luxury, often snatched in uncomfortable positions under the open sky. You seek out whatever shelter you can find, the lee of a large rock, a shallow cave, or occasionally, the rough hospitality of a caravanserai. These roadside inns, while offering some protection from the elements, are rarely clean. The ground is often hard-packed earth, crawling with insects. The air is thick with the smell of animal dung, stale smoke, and the unwashed bodies of other travelers. You lay down your simple mat, if you have one, and try to find a comfortable position. But your body aches from the day's exertions. Every muscle protests. Every joint screams. You wake frequently, stiff and unrested. Your dreams often a chaotic jumble of the day's anxieties and the lingering desires for a soft bed and a warm meal. The ideal of mindfulness in sleep becomes a desperate attempt to ignore the biting cold or the persistent itching of insect bites. The rigorous physical demands extend beyond just walking. You often carry what few scriptures you possess, perhaps a small Buddha image and your begging bowl. These items, seemingly light, become an oppressive weight over hundreds of miles. The straps of your simple backpack dig into your shoulders, creating raw, chafing wounds that never quite heal. Your feet, despite the calluses that have hardened over weeks, are a constant source of pain. Blisters form and burst, leaving open sores that are perpetually caked with dust. Every pebble feels like a boulder under your arch, every uneven patch of ground a potential twist or sprain. You learn to walk with an economy of motion, conserving every ounce of energy, a slow, deliberate shuffle that becomes second nature. Some historians still debate the precise dietary practices of monks on these long journeys, wondering if they truly adhered to strict vegetarianism given the limited resources. Beyond the sheer physical discomfort, there's the relentless assault on your senses, the constant wind, the blinding glare of the sun on sand, the choking dust, the endless, unchanging landscape. Your eyes, gritty and tired, strain against the glare. Your ears are filled with the drone of the wind, punctuated by the occasional cry of a bird or the distant rumble of thunder. Your sense of taste is perpetually dulled by the dust and the monotony of your meager diet. Your sense of smell is assaulted by the stench of unwashed bodies, animal waste, and the occasional whiff of smoke from a distant camp. There's no escaping these sensations. They are woven into the very fabric of your existence on the road, a constant reminder of the harsh reality you have embraced. You often find yourself pushing through incredible pain, both physical and mental, the ache in your joints, the throb in your temples from dehydration, the dull burn in your lungs from the dusty air. These become benchmarks against which you measure your spiritual progress. Can you transcend this pain? Can you find equanimity amidst the suffering? This is the true test of your vows, far more rigorous than any formal meditation retreat. You chant your sutras, not just for spiritual merit, but as a way to distract yourself from the discomfort, to focus your mind on something beyond the immediate sensations of your suffering body. The repetition, the familiar words, offer a small comfort in the vastness of the wilderness. Sometimes, in moments of extreme fatigue or hunger, your mind plays tricks on you. Mirages shimmer on the horizon, promising water or shade that never materialize. The shapes of rocks transform into menacing figures. You might even hear voices, faint whispers carried on the wind, tempting you to abandon your path, to seek the comforts of a settled life, a warm home, a full belly. These are the Maras of the road, the internal demons that challenge your resolve. You learn to recognize them, to acknowledge their presence without succumbing to their allure. You remind yourself of your purpose, of the teachings, of the profound suffering of all sentient beings that you seek to alleviate. The practice of meditation, which was once a structured, peaceful activity within the monastery walls, becomes a living, breathing exercise on the Silk Road. You meditate while you walk, your breath becoming your anchor, your footsteps a rhythmic counting. You meditate as you try to sleep, attempting to calm the restless mind, to find stillness amidst the discomfort. You meditate while you eat, transforming the act of sustenance into a moment of mindfulness, appreciating the preciousness of each meager bite. There are no serene gardens here, no quiet meditation halls. The world itself is your meditation cushion, and its harshness is your teacher. The very act of enduring becomes a form of spiritual discipline, an embodiment of the precept of endurance, Kshanti. This isn't theoretical. It's a daily, hourly, minute-by-minute practice. A fascinating, yet often overlooked detail of this monastic life was the constant battle against the elements of nature and basic hygiene. Imagine trying to maintain any semblance of cleanliness when water is precious, soap non-existent, and dust is your constant companion. Your hair becomes matted, your skin permanently caked with grime. The itching can be relentless, a minor but persistent torment. You become acutely aware of the smallest discomforts, the way a pebble in your sandal can rub a raw spot, the sting of sweat in your eyes, the constant dryness of your lips. These aren't grand trials, but their cumulative effect is a steady erosion of comfort and well-being. This forced neglect of personal hygiene wasn't a deliberate ascetic practice as much as a harsh reality, a daily reminder of your detachment from worldly comforts and the practical difficulties of the journey. You are acutely aware of the fragility of your own existence. Every day is a gamble against the elements, against illness, against the dangers of the road. There is no safety net, no immediate help if you fall ill or sustain an injury. You witness others succumb to the road's harshness, fellow travelers, animals, even other monks. Their fate serves as a stark reminder of your own vulnerability. This constant awareness of mortality, while terrifying, can also be a powerful catalyst for spiritual awakening, intensifying your focus on the impermanence of all things and the urgency of your quest for liberation. It strips away all pretense, all worldly attachment, leaving you with nothing but your faith and your bare will to survive. The Silk Road wasn't just a physical journey, it was a profound spiritual crucible, testing every fiber of your being. The suffering was not an accident. It was an integral part of the path, forcing you to confront your attachments, your fears, and your very definition of self. The relentless physical and mental agony forged a different kind of strength, one born not of comfort, but of profound deprivation. This, you realize, is the true meaning of asceticism on the road, not merely a denial of pleasure, but an active engagement with hardship as a means to transcend the limitations of the physical world. As your journey progresses, you learn that the road is not merely a physical challenge, but also a complex social landscape. You are not alone, though it often feels that way. You occasionally encounter other travelers, caravans laden with exotic goods, soldiers on patrol, or even other monks. Yet, navigating these interactions, especially within the context of the larger Buddhist community you encounter, reveals the subtle yet pervasive challenges of the monastic microcosm. Life within the Sangha on the Silk Road, even in temporary settlements, is far from idyllic. You carry letters of introduction, perhaps from your abbot or from a prominent patron, carefully wrapped in oilcloth to protect them from the elements. These are your credentials, your entry pass into the various monasteries and temples scattered along the route. Upon arrival at a new monastic community, often a stark collection of mud brick buildings or a series of caves carved into a cliff face, you present yourself with humility. But even here, among your fellow adherents to the Dharma, there is a distinct pecking order, an unseen hierarchy that dictates your reception. Seniority matters immensely. Monks who have spent decades on the path, who have accumulated wisdom and perhaps even fame, are treated with deference. Their pronouncements carry weight. Their presence commands respect. You, a humble traveler, are expected to show proper respect, to bow deeply, to listen attentively, and to speak only when invited. This isn't necessarily a bad thing. It fosters discipline and a sense of order. However, it also means that your voice, your experiences, your perspectives are often relegated to the background. You are a newcomer, and you must earn your place, often through quiet service and unquestioning adherence to local customs, no matter how perplexing they might seem. The Vinaya, the monastic rules, are incredibly detailed, governing everything from how you eat to how you interact with lay people. While the core principles remain consistent, their interpretation and application can vary subtly from one region to another, from one monastery to the next. You find yourself constantly observing, trying to discern the unwritten rules, the local nuances. What is permissible here might be frowned upon elsewhere. A seemingly innocuous act in one sangha could be a grave transgression in another. This constant need for vigilance, for adapting to shifting social codes, can be exhausting. You're always on edge, fearful of inadvertently causing offense or breaking a rule you weren't even aware existed. Consider the simple act of eating. In some monasteries, a communal meal might be served in silence. Each monk focused solely on the food and the act of consumption. In others, a senior monk might deliver a discourse during the meal, and you are expected to listen attentively. The portion sizes might be meager, a deliberate act of asceticism, or just a reflection of the monastery's limited resources. You are expected to accept whatever is offered, without complaint or preference. This is a crucial aspect of monastic discipline. Yet when your body is already depleted from weeks of travel, the thought of another small bowl of bland gruel can be a quiet torment. Then there are the internal politics. Even in communities dedicated to enlightenment and detachment, human nature persists. Monks, like anyone else, have personalities, preferences, and sometimes ambitions. There can be subtle rivalries for influence, for access to resources, or for the favor of wealthy patrons. You might witness quiet disagreements between different factions, perhaps over the interpretation of a scripture, or the allocation of tasks, or even just personal antipathies. As a transient monk, you are often caught in the periphery of these dynamics, an outsider trying not to ruffle feathers. Taking sides is dangerous, but remaining completely neutral can also be perceived as disinterest or aloofness. It's a delicate dance, requiring a level of social intelligence you might not have anticipated needing on a spiritual quest. The academic environment within these monasteries, while often revered, also presented its own set of challenges. Some monasteries were renowned centers of learning, housing vast collections of scriptures and welcoming scholars from distant lands. Others were more focused on ritual practice or communal living. As a visiting monk, your access to these precious texts, especially those not widely available, might be limited. You might be permitted to study for a time, but only under strict supervision, or with the implicit understanding that you would contribute to the monastery's upkeep through labor or donations. Imagine finally reaching a repository of ancient wisdom, only to find yourself barred from its full access, or having to earn the privilege through exhausting manual labor. The desire for knowledge, for deeper understanding, becomes another form of suffering when it is tantalizingly close, yet just out of reach. A particularly unique aspect of these monastic communities was their often complex relationship with the surrounding lay population. While monks relied on alms and patronage, they also served as spiritual guides, educators, and even healers for the local populace. This reciprocal relationship, while beneficial, also meant that the monastic community was deeply intertwined with the social and economic realities of the region. A bad harvest, a change in imperial policy, or a shift in popular sentiment could directly impact the monastery's well-being and, by extension, your own survival as a visiting monk. You are not just a spiritual seeker, you are a part of a larger, often precarious, ecosystem. One subtle but ever-present pressure was the expectation of demonstrating merit, whether through fervent chanting, rigorous meditation, or engaging in profound discussions about the Dharma. There was an unspoken expectation that you, as a traveling monk, were constantly striving for spiritual advancement. This wasn't necessarily a bad thing, as it encouraged diligence. However, it could also foster a sense of internal competition, a quiet pressure to prove your worth, to show that your journey was fruitful, even when you felt physically and mentally depleted. The idea of spiritual superiority subtly permeates even the most outwardly humble communities. Consider the language barrier. The Silk Road was a melting pot of cultures and languages. While Sanskrit was the sacred language of many Buddhist texts, and various local languages were used for everyday communication, you couldn't expect every monastery to speak your native tongue. Communicating complex philosophical ideas, or even basic needs, could be incredibly difficult. Imagine trying to explain your journey, your lineage, or your understanding of a particular sutra when you share only a few common words with your interlocutor. Misunderstandings were common, leading to frustration, isolation, and sometimes unintentional offense. This constant struggle to communicate adds another layer of mental exhaustion to your already arduous journey. The simple fact of being a guest, even a welcome one, carries its own burden. You are constantly aware that you are consuming the monastery's resources. However meager, you feel an obligation to contribute, whether through manual labor, chopping wood, drawing water, cleaning, or by offering your limited knowledge or skills. This is a necessary part of monastic life, but when you are already physically drained from travel, these duties can feel like an additional weight. You long for true rest, for a moment to simply be, but the expectations of the community, both explicit and implicit, rarely allow for it. Historians still debate the extent to which these monasteries served as true havens versus simply waypoints with their own complex social dynamics. Finally, there's the pervasive sense of impermanence even within these seemingly stable communities. Monasteries, especially those in remote areas, were vulnerable. They could be abandoned due to political instability, lack of resources, or simply the shifting sands of the desert. You might arrive at a place described in your letters only to find it deserted, its prayer flags tattered, its statues crumbling. This constant reminder of the transient nature of even religious institutions reinforces the core Buddhist teaching of anicca, impermanence. But it also means that your sources of refuge and learning are never guaranteed. The monastic microcosm, for all its potential for solace and enlightenment, was also a place of subtle challenges, complex dynamics, and a constant reminder that even within the sacred, human frailties and external pressures persisted. You felt the sting of dust and the ache of hunger, weathered the internal politics of the Sangha. Now, another layer of complexity reveals itself, the precariousness of patronage's perils. Your entire monastic existence, especially on the Silk Road, is intricately tied to the whims and fortunes of others. Empires rise and fall, merchants thrive and go bankrupt, and their support, or lack thereof, can mean the difference between spiritual progress and utter destitution. Imagine arriving at a once thriving oasis town, perhaps one known for its grand Buddhist temple, only to find it deserted, or worse, fallen into disrepair. The ornate carvings are chipped, the murals faded, the stupas crumbling. You learn, perhaps from a lone, wizened villager, that the local merchant family, who had generously funded the temple for generations, recently lost their wealth in a disastrous trade venture. Or perhaps the reigning dynasty, once devout Buddhists, has shifted their allegiance to another faith, or simply decided that funding distant monasteries is no longer a priority. Without their steady stream of donations, the monks dispersed. The temple fell silent, and your anticipated haven vanishes like a mirage. This isn't an isolated incident. The Silk Road was a volatile place, and the fortunes of its inhabitants shifted with the trade winds. A new invention, a change in diplomatic relations, or even a localized conflict could disrupt entire economic networks. When the caravan routes dried up, so did the flow of wealth, and with it, the lifeblood of many monastic communities. You, as a wandering monk, are acutely aware of this vulnerability. You carry no wealth yourself, relying entirely on the dana, the generosity of others. But what happens when that well of generosity runs dry? The emperor's favor, or lack thereof, was perhaps the most significant external factor. Powerful emperors, often seeking to legitimize their rule or to bring a unifying spiritual force to their vast territories, would lavish immense resources on Buddhist monasteries. They would fund the construction of magnificent cave temples, commission the translation of countless sutras, and even provide land and provisions for thousands of monks. Being in an era of imperial favor meant a steady supply of food, protection from local bandits, and access to scholarly resources. You might find yourself welcomed into grand establishments, enjoying a brief respite from the harsh road, with time to study and meditate. However, imperial favor was notoriously fickle. A new emperor might ascend the throne with different religious leanings, perhaps favoring Taoism or Confucianism, or even a rival Buddhist sect. With a stroke of a pen, your entire way of life could be undermined. Edicts could be issued, seizing monastic lands, forcing monks to disrobe, or even persecuting the faith. Imagine the terror of being caught in such a purge. Suddenly, an outlaw in the very lands where you once sought refuge. You've heard stories of monasteries ransacked, their libraries burned, their precious relics destroyed. Some historians still debate the specific motivations behind these imperial crackdowns, whether they were purely religious or often driven by economic and political concerns. Even when patrons were devout, their generosity often came with implicit expectations. A merchant might fund a new hall in a monastery, but expect the monks to offer prayers for his prosperous journeys, or to dedicate merits for his deceased ancestors. A local governor might provide provisions, but expect the monastery to serve as a center of moral instruction for his populace, subtly aligning the Dharma with his own political agenda. You are, in essence, a spiritual commodity, and your independence, your detachment from worldly affairs, is constantly tested by these subtle pressures. Your spiritual mission becomes entangled with the mundane realities of quid pro quo. It's a tricky balance, accepting the necessary support without compromising your vows or the integrity of the Dharma. You also encounter the vast disparity in patronage. Some monasteries, located on major trade arteries or near wealthy cities, might be opulent, overflowing with offerings, their monks well-fed and clad in fine robes. Others, in remote mountain passes or impoverished agricultural regions, are barely clinging to existence, their monks emaciated and their buildings crumbling. As you journey, you experience both extremes, and the contrast can be jarring. It's a stark reminder that even within the Sangha, earthly fortunes play a significant role. The ideal of universal compassion and equality meets the very real challenge of economic inequality. Consider the wealthy caravaneers who occasionally offer a ride or a meal. Their generosity is invaluable, saving you days of walking and providing much-needed sustenance. But their priorities are purely commercial. You are a passenger, an incidental companion. They might be superstitious, hoping your presence brings good luck, or simply pragmatic, seeing you as a harmless addition to their numbers. You are beholden to their schedule, their destination, and their decisions. If they decide to take a different route or linger in a town for days, you are simply along for the ride, your own spiritual timetable thrown into disarray. Your freedom, a cherished aspect of the wandering monk's life, is constantly curtailed by your reliance on others. The act of begging or receiving alms, while a cornerstone of the Vinaya, also places you in a position of inherent vulnerability. You are entirely dependent on the goodwill of strangers. This forces a profound humility, stripping away any sense of self-importance, but it also means you are constantly at the mercy of others' moods, their beliefs, their generosity, or their outright refusal. You are reminded daily that your sustenance is not a given, but a gift, one that can be withheld at any moment. This constant uncertainty adds a unique layer of stress to your journey, a constant background hum of anxiety about where your next meal or your next safe night's rest will come from. Perhaps one of the most insidious perils of patronage was the temptation it presented. A well-funded monastery might offer comfort, stability, and access to vast libraries of knowledge. The temptation to settle down, to abandon the arduous journey, to trade the dangers of the road for the security of a well-endowed institution could be immense. You might witness monks who, once wandering ascetics, have become accustomed to a life of relative ease, their original fervor perhaps dulled by comfort. This challenge wasn't about external threats, but an internal one, the subtle erosion of your own ascetic vows by the very support meant to sustain them. The economic infrastructure of the Silk Road itself was fluid. New trade routes emerged. Old ones fell into disuse. Political shifts could close borders or impose crippling taxes on caravans, stifling trade and, consequently, the wealth that flowed into monastic communities. Imagine planning your route based on the presence of a known Buddhist center, only to arrive and find that its patrons have moved on, or that the town itself has dwindled into insignificance. This constant uncertainty about where reliable support might be found adds another layer of navigational difficulty, both literally and figuratively. You are constantly adapting, constantly assessing the stability of your potential havens. Even the conversion of local populations to Buddhism did not guarantee perpetual support. While new converts might initially be fervent in their devotion, their adherence could wane over generations, especially if the new faith struggled to meet their immediate needs or if charismatic leaders of other traditions emerged. The struggle to maintain and deepen the faith within communities and thus secure their continued patronage was a constant, often uphill, battle. The monk's role was not just to bring the Dharma, but to cultivate and sustain it in often challenging cultural landscapes. Ultimately, the perilous dance with patronage highlights the fundamental tension for a Buddhist monk on the Silk Road, the ideal of complete detachment from worldly affairs versus the absolute necessity of worldly support to survive and propagate the Dharma. You rely on the world, yet you must transcend it. This paradox is a daily lived reality, a constant test of your ability to navigate the material realm without becoming entangled by its desires or its inherent impermanence. The kindness of strangers is a blessing, but it is also a reminder of your vulnerability, a thread that could snap at any moment, leaving you adrift in the vast, indifferent expanse of the Silk Road. You've contended with the physical grind, the subtle social pressures, and the unpredictable nature of patronage. Now, you face an intellectual and spiritual challenge just as formidable, the bewildering array of sects and squabbles that fractured the very Buddhist community you sought to join. The Dharma, far from being a single, unified path, was a vibrant, sometimes contentious tapestry of differing interpretations, practices, and philosophical viewpoints. On the Silk Road, you encounter them all. Imagine arriving at a new monastery, eager to engage in discourse and deepen your understanding, only to find yourself in the midst of a heated debate. One group of monks passionately argues for the supremacy of the Sarvastivada school, emphasizing the reality of dharmas, ultimate constituents of reality, and a detailed analysis of existence. Their robes might be dyed a particular shade, their chanting style distinct, in the same compound, or perhaps just across the valley. Another group adheres strictly to the Mahasamgika view, asserting the transcendent nature of the Buddha and the importance of the assembly Sangha in interpreting the teachings. Their practices might seem lax to the Sarvastivadins, or vice versa. These aren't just academic disagreements. These were fundamental schisms, often leading to separate monastic lineages, distinct texts, and sometimes even open rivalry. You, as a wandering monk, are caught in the middle. To which school do you owe allegiance? Your own training might lean towards one interpretation, but to openly declare it could alienate the community you seek refuge with. You must navigate these doctrinal minefields with extreme caution, learning to speak in general terms, focusing on the core principles of the Dharma, rather than getting embroiled in sectarian disputes. It's like walking a tightrope, trying to maintain your integrity while avoiding offense. The sheer volume and diversity of scriptures is another source of intellectual overwhelm. While you might carry a few prized sutras, every monastery you visit seems to possess its own unique collection, often in different languages or dialects. The Tripitaka, the Buddhist canon, was not a static, universally agreed upon compilation. Different schools had different versions, different commentaries, and even entirely different texts they considered canonical. You might encounter monks who dedicate their lives to the Abhidharma texts, meticulously cataloging every aspect of consciousness and reality, while others prioritize the Prajnaparamita Sutras, emphasizing emptiness and the wisdom of non-duality. The challenge is not just in understanding these complex ideas, but in reconciling them, or at least acknowledging their coexistence, without feeling your own understanding crumble. Some historians still debate the precise mechanisms by which these various schools maintained their distinct identities while operating within the broader Buddhist tradition. Consider the debates over the nature of the Buddha himself. Was he a historical human being who achieved enlightenment, a path open to all, or was he a transcendent, almost divine being, a celestial figure whose existence spanned eons? These were not abstract philosophical questions. They influenced daily practice, the understanding of liberation, and the very goal of the Buddhist path. Imagine hearing devout monks argue vehemently over these points, each side convinced of their absolute truth, and realizing that the Buddha you learned about in your home monastery might be viewed entirely differently just a few hundred miles away. It could be deeply disorienting. Then there's the concept of the Bodhisattva path, so central to Mahayana Buddhism, while earlier schools, often termed Nikaya Buddhism, or sometimes, inaccurately, Hinayana, emphasized individual liberation for the Arhat. Mahayana introduced the ideal of the bodhisattva, one who postpones their own enlightenment to help all sentient beings. This shift in emphasis led to new practices, new vows, and new iconography. You might encounter elaborate rituals dedicated to celestial bodhisattvas like Avalokiteshvara or Manjushri, practices that might seem utterly foreign to a monk trained in a tradition focused solely on self-discipline and individual meditation. This isn't just a difference in philosophy. It's a difference in the very purpose and method of spiritual cultivation. The sheer proliferation of practices could also be bewildering. Some monks you encounter might engage in rigorous, solitary meditation in caves, pursuing a path of extreme asceticism. Others might be part of large communal monasteries, their days filled with chanting, elaborate rituals, and the copying of texts. Still others might focus on the construction of stupas, the making of devotional offerings, or the creation of intricate mandalas. There was no single right way to practice Buddhism on the Silk Road, and discerning which path was most efficacious or most aligned with your own disposition could be a source of constant internal questioning. You carry the weight of your own tradition, yet you are confronted daily with the validity of others. The language of the Dharma itself became a point of contention. While Sanskrit was often considered the sacred language, many texts were translated into various Central Asian languages and eventually into Chinese. These translations were not always uniform, and subtle nuances in meaning could be lost or altered, leading to further doctrinal disputes. Imagine two learned monks arguing over the precise meaning of a single Sanskrit term, each basing their interpretation on a different translation. Each convinced their version is the true rendering of the Buddha's word. It underscores the immense challenge of preserving and transmitting a complex spiritual tradition across vast linguistic and cultural divides. Beyond the major philosophical divides, there were often smaller, more localized squabbles, perhaps over the proper way to conduct an ordination ceremony, or the correct lineage of a particular teaching, or even disputes over the ownership of certain relics or precious texts. These might seem trivial to an outsider, but within the close-knit, often isolated monastic communities, they could fester into deep resentments. You might inadvertently step into one of these long-standing disputes, becoming an unwilling participant in a conflict that has nothing to do with your personal journey. The ideal of monastic harmony, while preached, was not always perfectly realized. The role of logic and debate, hetu vidya, was highly valued in some schools, leading to intricate philosophical arguments and rigorous intellectual training. Monks would engage in formal debates, sometimes for days, to refine their understanding and challenge opposing viewpoints. While intellectually stimulating, these debates could also become highly competitive, even aggressive, turning into contests of wit and rhetorical skill, rather than genuine quests for truth. You, a humble monk, might find yourself outmatched in such an arena, your quiet contemplation feeling inadequate against the sharp minds of seasoned debaters. It's a reminder that even the pursuit of wisdom can become a source of contention. A subtle but significant challenge was the syncretism you often encountered. As Buddhism spread, it didn't always replace existing beliefs entirely. It often blended with them. You might see Buddhist deities depicted alongside local gods, or find local rituals incorporated into Buddhist practices. While this helped Buddhism adapt and spread, it could also dilute the purity of the Dharma, leading to practices that seemed to diverge significantly from the core teachings. For a monk striving for authentic understanding, navigating these blended traditions required careful discernment, lest you inadvertently promote something not truly in line with the Buddha's original message. Ultimately, the journey through the diverse landscape of Buddhist sects on the Silk Road was a profound lesson in the complexity of human interpretation. It showed you that even a single profound truth can be seen through countless lenses, each valid in its own context. yet sometimes in direct opposition to another. The squabbles were a testament to the human desire for certainty, for defining boundaries, even within a path that preached non-attachment and emptiness. You learn to hold your own beliefs lightly, to cultivate an openness to different perspectives, and to find the common thread of compassion and wisdom that, despite all the disagreements, still bound these disparate communities together. This was the ultimate challenge, to find unity amidst disunity, to hold on to your own path while respecting the myriad paths of others. You've braved the inner turmoil of sectarian disputes and the fickle nature of patronage. Now, step out onto the raw, untamed Silk Road once more, and confront the very tangible threats of bandits, beasts, and bureaucracy. The world outside the monastery walls is a harsh master, and its dangers are far more immediate than philosophical debates or the whims of an emperor. The most notorious and terrifying of these were the bandits. These weren't just opportunistic thieves. They were often highly organized groups, sometimes disillusioned soldiers, desperate former merchants, or tribal warriors who saw the lucrative trade routes as their personal treasury. They lay in wait in narrow mountain passes, in the desolate stretches of the desert where help was impossible, or near isolated oases. You, as a lone monk, carrying no obvious valuables, might seem an unlikely target, but your robes could be stripped, your begging bowl taken, or you could simply be robbed of your meager provisions. The real danger, however, was not just material loss, but violence. You've heard chilling tales of monks being beaten, left for dead, or even enslaved. Some accounts even describe groups of bandits specializing in attacking religious travelers, either for their perceived piety, which might translate to hidden wealth, or simply out of a twisted sense of sport. The fear of an ambush is a constant, gnawing presence, making every turn in the road a moment of heightened anxiety. You learn to scan the horizon, to listen for the faint echo of hooves, to distinguish between the natural sounds of the wind and the deliberate movements of men. Then there are the beasts. The Silk Road snakes through some of the most untamed wilderness on earth. Wolves prowl the fringes of settled lands, their hungry eyes gleaming in the dark. Bears, though rarer, might guard mountain caves, disturbed by your solitary trek. More insidious are the smaller, but no less deadly, creatures, venomous snakes basking on sun-warmed rocks, scorpions scuttling underfoot, and swarms of biting insects that can make a night's rest a living torment. You learn to walk with vigilance, your eyes constantly on the ground, your staff ready to fend off a strike. A snake bite in the middle of nowhere, with no antidote and days from any form of settlement, is a death sentence. The sound of a predatory howl at night is enough to send a shiver down your spine, forcing you to huddle closer to your meager fire, if you even have the means to build one. Beyond the immediate threats of living creatures, the environment itself is a beast. The Taklamakan Desert, aptly named "Once you go in, you don't come out," is a vast, suffocating expanse of shifting sands, extreme temperatures, and terrifying sandstorms. You watch in horror as walls of sand, miles high, sweep across the horizon, blotting out the sun. When caught in one, the world becomes a maelstrom of stinging grit, blinding you, filling your mouth and nostrils, and threatening to bury you alive. The wind howls like a banshee, tearing at your robes, trying to rip you from your feet. You cling to whatever meager shelter you can find, pressing your face into the sand, praying for it to pass. These storms can last for days, destroying visibility, obliterating trails, and leaving you disoriented and utterly exhausted. The mountain passes, too, are formidable adversaries. The Pamirs, the Hindu Kush, the Tian Shan. These are colossal ranges, often snow-capped even in summer, their jagged peaks scraping the sky. The air grows thin, making every breath a struggle, your lungs burning with the effort. Hypoxia can set in, dulling your mind, making you stumble and lose your way. The paths are often narrow, clinging precariously to cliff faces, with sheer drops hundreds of feet below. Landslides are a constant danger, sending tons of rock cascading down, obliterating the path and forcing long detours, or worse, trapping you. The cold is relentless, piercing through your thin robes, threatening frostbite. You sometimes see the frozen bodies of less fortunate travelers, stark warnings of the mountain's indifference. And then there's bureaucracy, a different kind of beast altogether, often just as frustrating and dangerous as any bandit or sandstorm. While central authorities might nominally support Buddhism, local officials, border guards, and petty bureaucrats often saw wandering monks as a nuisance, a potential drain on resources, or even a suspicious element. You might encounter checkpoints where you are stopped, interrogated, and made to wait for hours or even days. Your papers, if you possess any, would be scrutinized. You might be asked for taxes or fees that are nothing more than thinly veiled bribes. Refusal could lead to detention, expulsion from the territory, or even violence. Imagine standing for hours under a scorching sun or in bitter cold while a board official slowly examines your travel permit, perhaps feigning illiteracy to extract a payment. You have no recourse, no authority to appeal to. Your vows of nonviolence and detachment mean you cannot resist, only patiently endure. Some historians still debate the true extent to which central imperial control reached these remote border outposts, often suggesting that local officials operated with considerable autonomy and self-interest. The official caravans, while offering a measure of safety, also operate under strict rules and bureaucratic oversight. You might be allowed to join for a segment of the journey, but you are not a privileged passenger. You are often expected to contribute in some way, perhaps by helping with tasks, or simply by maintaining a low profile. Their schedule is dictated by trade, by official decrees, and by the availability of resources, not by your spiritual needs. If the caravan decides to wait for a week for a new consignment of silk, you wait too. Your progress stalled. Local customs and laws, often unwritten, can also pose bureaucratic hurdles. You might inadvertently violate a taboo or enter a restricted area, leading to swift and unpleasant consequences from local authorities. You are an outsider in a world governed by ancient traditions, and ignorance is rarely accepted as an excuse. This constant need to navigate unfamiliar legal and social landscapes adds another layer of mental strain to your already arduous journey. The freedom of the wandering monk, so romanticized in Scripture, often collides with the very real constraints of civil authority. Even within the context of state-sponsored monasticism, bureaucracy could be a burden. If you sought to reside in a large, imperially funded monastery, you would often need official permission, presenting your credentials, and undergoing scrutiny. This was a necessary step to ensure the integrity of the Sangha and prevent imposters. But for a weary traveler, it could feel like just another hurdle. The paperwork, the waiting, the interviews, all consume precious time and energy. Ultimately, the Silk Road was a stage where the grand aspirations of spiritual enlightenment met the harsh, unyielding realities of the physical world and human governance. Bandits, beasts, and bureaucracy were not just obstacles, they were integral parts of the journey, forcing you to cultivate not just spiritual detachment, but also a profound sense of resilience, adaptability, and unwavering vigilance. Every day was a test of survival, a constant reminder that the path to enlightenment was paved not with roses, but with dust, danger, and the frustrating intricacies of a world still very much bound by its earthly limitations. You've braved the external perils of the Silk Road and the internal divisions of the Sangha. Now, you face a different, yet equally demanding, kind of labor, the burden of books. The propagation of the Dharma relied heavily on the written word, and as a monk, you are often drawn into the monumental, painstaking, and often physically punishing task of copying and translating scriptures. This isn't just a scholarly pursuit. It's a testament to unwavering dedication, a sacrifice of eyesight and hand strength for the sake of future generations. Imagine entering a scriptorium, often a simple, dimly lit room within a monastery, perhaps carved into a cave wall. The air is thick with the smell of ink, parchment, and the subtle mustiness of ancient paper. You sit hunched over a low table, your back aching from hours of immobility, your eyes straining in the flickering lamplight or the harsh glare of a single window. Before you lies a stack of blank bamboo slips, lengths of processed paper, or even precious silk, awaiting your meticulous hand. Beside it, the master copy, often an ancient faded text brought from India or Central Asia, its script unfamiliar, its meaning sometimes obscure. The act of copying a sutra is not merely transcribing words. It is a profound act of devotion, a form of active meditation. Each stroke of the brush, each careful formation of a character is a prayer. Your hand cramps, your fingers ache, but you continue, driven by the knowledge that every perfectly rendered character brings the Dharma closer to another sentient being. Errors are unacceptable. A single misplaced stroke, a forgotten character, could alter the meaning of a sacred text, potentially leading countless future practitioners astray. The pressure for absolute accuracy is immense, a constant weight on your shoulders. Some historians still debate the prevalence of copy errors in the transmission of these ancient texts and how significantly they altered the original meanings. Then there's the preparation. The ink isn't bought from a store. It's painstakingly ground from soot and glue, often with the addition of natural dyes to achieve a rich, enduring black. The brushes are carefully crafted, their tips requiring constant maintenance. The paper or parchment itself is often made by hand, a laborious process involving soaking, pounding, and stretching raw materials. You might find yourself assisting in these preparatory tasks, your hands stained with ink, your muscles aching from hours of grinding or stretching. This manual labor, while seemingly mundane, is an integral part of the process, connecting you directly to the material aspect of transmitting the Dharma. The greatest intellectual burden, however, lies in translation. You encounter texts written in Sanskrit, Pali, or various Central Asian languages, intended for a Chinese audience, or perhaps a Sogdian or Khotanese one. This isn't a simple word-for-word conversion. It requires a profound understanding of both the source language and the target language, a deep familiarity with Buddhist philosophy, and an almost intuitive grasp of cultural nuances. How do you render a complex philosophical concept like shunyata, emptiness, into a language that has no direct equivalent? How do you convey the subtle spiritual weight of a Sanskrit mantra into a language with a completely different phonetic and semantic structure? You work in teams, often with native speakers of the source language, perhaps an Indian monk who knows Sanskrit, and native speakers of the target language, a Chinese scholar monk. The debates can be fierce, lasting for days over a single phrase, a single character. Each side strives for accuracy, for elegance, for a translation that captures not just the literal meaning, but also the spirit and intent of the original. The pressure is immense, knowing that these translations will form the bedrock of Buddhist understanding for generations, shaping the very way people perceive the Dharma in their own tongue. This collaborative effort, while essential, can also be a source of intellectual tension and exhaustion. The sheer volume of texts is overwhelming. Imagine the centuries-long project of translating the entire Buddhist canon into Chinese, thousands upon thousands of scrolls, each requiring meticulous transcription and translation. You are just one small cog in this colossal machine, yet your contribution is vital. The work is endless. As soon as one text is completed, another awaits. There's no sense of ultimate completion, only the continuous flow of knowledge, painstakingly transferred from one script to another. Beyond the physical and intellectual demands, there's the monotony. Day after day, week after week, you are engaged in the same repetitive motions. Your world shrinks to the size of the scroll before you, the rhythmic scratch of the brush, the silent turning of pages. This intense focus, while meditative for some, can also be mind-numbingly dull for others. You fight against your mind wandering, against the temptation to rush, to cut corners. The sacredness of the task is your only motivation against the encroaching boredom. A curious detail from this period is the occasional inclusion of small, almost imperceptible, scribal errors, which sometimes serve as clues for modern historians tracking the lineage and spread of particular manuscript traditions. The consequences of your work are immense. These texts are the very foundation of the Dharma, the guideposts to liberation. A flawed translation could lead to misinterpretation, to practices that deviate from the true path. The responsibility weighs heavily on your shoulders. You are not just a monk. You are a guardian of the Buddha's word, entrusted with its accurate and faithful transmission. This profound sense of duty fuels your perseverance, even when your eyes ache and your fingers tremble from exhaustion. Furthermore, the materials themselves were precious. High-quality paper, specialized inks, and rare pigments for illustrations were often expensive and difficult to acquire on the Silk Road. The resources for creating these scriptures were often dependent on the very patronage we discussed earlier. A shortage of materials could halt the entire process, frustrating the efforts of dedicated scribes and translators. This scarcity often meant that every piece of paper was used, every drop of ink conserved, adding another layer of meticulousness and pressure to the work. The intellectual isolation could also be a burden. While you worked in teams for translation, the act of copying was often solitary. There might be no one to discuss a particularly complex passage with, no one to share your insights or your frustrations. You are immersed in ancient wisdom, yet physically cut off from contemporary intellectual engagement, save for the occasional arrival of a new traveling scholar monk. This intense focus on the past, while necessary for preservation, could also lead to a sense of intellectual solitude. Ultimately, the burden of books on the Silk Road was a profound act of devotion, a silent, unglamorous sacrifice. It was a testament to the belief that the Dharma, once written, could transcend time and distance, reaching countless individuals who would never set foot on the treacherous roads you traversed. Your aching hands, your strained eyes, your weary back, these were the physical costs of ensuring that the Buddha's timeless wisdom would continue to illuminate the path for generations to come. You've pushed through physical pain, navigated complex social structures, braved external threats, and endured the grueling labor of scholarship. Yet, perhaps the most insidious challenge of all, a quiet torment that gnaws at your spirit, is the isolation's embrace. The wandering monk's life, though outwardly dedicated to spreading the Dharma, often condemned you to a profound and pervasive loneliness, a disconnect from the very human connections that sustain most lives. Imagine waking alone, day after day, to the vast, indifferent expanse of the desert or the silent majesty of the mountains. There's no family to greet you, no familiar faces to share a meal with. Your monastery, your home, is thousands of miles away. a distant memory of comforting routines and known companionship. You might join a caravan for safety, but these are pragmatic alliances, not deep friendships. The merchants and guards are focused on their trade, their conversations centered on profits and perils, not spiritual insights or personal anecdotes. You are a silent observer, an ephemeral presence in their transient world. The very act of taking monastic vows means renouncing family life, marriage, and personal possessions. This is a deliberate choice, a sacrifice for the greater good of liberation. But on the Silk Road, this renunciation takes on a much harsher edge. There are no occasional visits from your parents, no letters from siblings. You are truly cut off, a leaf blown by the wind, with no anchor to the conventional world. The emotional void left by these severed ties can be immense, a constant ache beneath the surface of your spiritual resolve. Some historians still debate the psychological toll of such radical detachment on monks, particularly those on long, arduous journeys. Consider the simple act of conversation. How long has it been since you engaged in a truly meaningful exchange, a deep discussion about the Dharma, or even a light-hearted jest? Your interactions are often transactional, asking for alms, seeking directions, negotiating safe passage. There's little room for the nuances of human connection, for shared laughter or quiet empathy. Your voice, accustomed to chanting and solitary contemplation, feels rusty when you finally have an opportunity to speak more than a few essential words. You long for the intellectual stimulation of scholarly debate, the spiritual camaraderie of shared meditation, but such moments are rare and fleeting. When you do encounter other monks, their circumstances might be so different that true connection remains elusive. A scholar monk in a well-endowed city monastery might not comprehend your daily struggle for survival. A local ascetic living in a cave might view your travels with suspicion or disdain for your engagement with the outside world. Even within the Sangha, there's a disconnect, a lack of shared experience that makes genuine intimacy difficult to cultivate. You are a traveler, constantly moving, never truly belonging to any one community. The stark landscapes amplify this sense of isolation. The endless plains, the towering mountains, the vast empty deserts, they are beautiful in their raw power, but they are also relentlessly lonely. There are no comforting landmarks, no familiar trees or rivers to anchor your sense of place. You are a speck in an immense, indifferent universe, and this physical isolation can translate into a deep spiritual solitude. You might feel utterly alone in your quest, questioning whether your efforts are truly making a difference, whether your suffering has any meaning. This pervasive loneliness can lead to a quiet despondency. You might find yourself battling not just hunger or fatigue, but also waves of sadness, of yearning for companionship, for a moment of genuine human warmth. These feelings are often suppressed, as they are seen as attachments, as impediments to your spiritual progress. But suppressing them doesn't make them disappear. It merely pushes them deeper, where they can fester, eroding your resolve from within. The ideal of detachment is one thing. The lived reality of profound loneliness is another. Then there's the detachment from the common understanding of reality. Your entire life is focused on transcending the mundane, on perceiving the world as impermanent, unsatisfactory, and lacking a permanent self. While this is the path to liberation, it also creates a chasm between you and the lay people you encounter. Their concerns are with harvest, family, trade, and local politics, the very things you have renounced. You can offer spiritual guidance, but you cannot truly share their daily lives, their joys, or their sorrows. You are a figure of reverence, perhaps, but also a figure apart, always at a distance. Even the practice of meditation, while offering moments of profound inner peace, can paradoxically deepen the sense of external isolation. As you delve deeper into the nature of consciousness, as you experience the illusory nature of self, the world of conventional reality can seem increasingly distant, less real. While this is the goal, it also means that the shared experiences of humanity, the very fabric of social interaction, might begin to feel less tangible, less compelling. You are walking a path that few understand, and even fewer choose to follow, creating an almost unbridgeable gap between your inner world and the external one. A unique form of isolation stemmed from the very nature of your mission. You carried sacred texts, ideas, and practices that were often entirely alien to the cultures you encountered. Imagine trying to explain the subtleties of karma or the emptiness of phenomena to a nomadic tribesman whose entire worldview revolves around ancestral spirits and the immediate needs of his flock. There was a constant need to adapt, to simplify, to find common ground, but also an awareness that much of your deepest understanding simply couldn't be conveyed, leaving you feeling profoundly misunderstood, even in moments of successful propagation. The simple absence of familiar comforts contributes to this isolation. The food you eat is foreign. The sounds you hear are unfamiliar. The smells are strange. There's no comforting routine, no beloved object to hold, no familiar melody to hum. Every sensory input is a reminder that you are a stranger in a strange land, completely out of your element, constantly adjusting, never truly at ease. This relentless unfamiliarity, this constant state of being an outsider, creates a profound and enduring sense of being alone. Ultimately, the embrace of isolation on the Silk Road was a crucible for the spirit. It forced you to confront your deepest needs for connection, for belonging, and to find solace, if possible, within yourself. It was a test of your inner resources, your ability to cultivate self-reliance and inner peace amidst profound external solitude. The path to enlightenment, it turns out, was often walked in silence, with only the wind as your companion and the echo of your own thoughts for company. It was a solitary journey, a testament to the fact that while the Dharma is for all, the profound transformation it demands is often a deeply personal and lonely endeavor. You've wrestled with loneliness, endured the physical and intellectual burdens, and navigated the socio-political currents of the Silk Road. Yet, another formidable challenge emerges, one that threatens the very integrity of the Dharma, the presence of heretics and hypocrites. Not all who donned robes or claimed spiritual authority were genuine, and discerning true wisdom from deceptive practices was a constant, unsettling task. Imagine entering a bustling caravan stop, filled with merchants, laborers, and travelers. You see a figure clad in robes similar to yours, drawing a crowd. He speaks eloquently, perhaps even quoting scriptures you recognize. But as you listen closer, something feels off. His teachings subtly deviate from the core tenets of the Dharma. He might promise instant enlightenment through a simple ritual, or guarantee wealth and health in exchange for lavish offerings. These are the heretics, not necessarily malicious, but misguided, spreading interpretations that distort the Buddha's original message, often appealing to people's worldly desires rather than their spiritual liberation. Your duty as a monk is to uphold the true Dharma. But how do you challenge such a figure without causing a public scene, especially when you are a guest in this foreign land? Then there are the imposters, individuals who donned monastic robes solely for personal gain. The Vinaya, the monastic code, specifically warned against such individuals. They might leverage the respect accorded to monks to beg for more than their needs, to demand luxurious accommodation, or even to engage in outright deception or theft. You've heard stories of monks who were actually spies or common criminals hiding in plain sight. Their actions cast a shadow over the entire Sangha, undermining the trust and reverence that genuine practitioners worked so hard to build. Detecting them is difficult. They mimic the outward signs of piety, making it hard to distinguish them from sincere practitioners. Some historians still debate the true number of such imposters and their long-term impact on the reputation of the Buddhist Sangha along the trade routes. The problem of corruption within established monastic institutions was also a grim reality. Not every monastery you visited was a beacon of pure practice. Some, especially those that had grown wealthy through generous patronage, might have fallen prey to materialism. Monks might become preoccupied with the accumulation of land, riches, or political influence, neglecting their spiritual duties. You might observe lavish meals, ornate robes, and monks engaging in activities that seem far removed from the ascetic ideal of the Buddha. This internal decay, while perhaps less dramatic than a bandit attack, was arguably more corrosive to the integrity of the Dharma. It challenged your own faith, forcing you to question whether the path you had chosen was truly immune to the corrupting influence of the world. Consider the challenge of distinguishing genuine spiritual power from mere superstition or charlatanism. Local populations, steeped in their own animistic beliefs or folk practices, might attribute magical powers to monks, expecting them to perform miracles, heal illnesses, or predict the future. While some monks might possess genuine meditative attainments or herbal knowledge, others might exploit these expectations for personal gain, performing tricks or making false promises. As a true practitioner, you aim to guide people towards the Dharma, towards understanding suffering and its cessation, not to fulfill their worldly desires. Yet, rejecting their superstitious requests outright could alienate potential converts or even invite hostility. It's a delicate balance, trying to educate without condemning, to guide without deceiving. The presence of rival religious traditions also complicated matters, sometimes blurring the lines between what was considered Buddhist and what was not. Zoroastrians, Manichaeans, Nestorian Christians, and various local cults thrived alongside Buddhism on the Silk Road, while some interactions were peaceful, allowing for cross-cultural exchange. Others were contentious. You might encounter fierce debates, with adherents of other faiths aggressively challenging Buddhist doctrines. In some cases, these rivalries could escalate into accusations of heresy or even persecution, particularly when powerful patrons shifted their allegiance. This constant intellectual and spiritual competition forced you to rigorously examine your own beliefs, to articulate the Dharma clearly, and to defend it against misrepresentation. Even within the broad spectrum of accepted Buddhist schools, extremism could manifest. Some ascetics took their vows to such an extreme that their practices bordered on self-harm, engaging in rituals that seemed to contradict the middle path taught by the Buddha. Others might develop rigid, dogmatic interpretations that fostered intolerance towards other Buddhist schools or even lay people. Witnessing these extremes, even among those who claimed the same ultimate goal, was unsettling, forcing you to constantly reevaluate what constituted genuine practice and what was simply an aberrant deviation. The lack of central authority on the vast Silk Road meant that these issues of heresy and hypocrisy were often left unchecked. There was no single Buddhist pope to issue decrees or excommunicate errant monks. Each monastery largely governed itself, and the influence of a corrupt or misguided individual could spread unchecked within their local sphere. You, as a lone wandering monk, possessed little power to rectify such situations, save for your own personal example and the quiet, persistent teaching of the true Dharma. It was a constant battle against the internal decay of the institution itself, a struggle to maintain purity in a world filled with human imperfection. This constant exposure to the less than ideal aspects of human nature, even within the sacred sphere, could be incredibly disillusioning. You embarked on this journey seeking enlightenment, spiritual purity, and the propagation of a noble truth, To encounter greed, deception, and hypocrisy among those who claim to uphold the same ideals was a profound test of your faith and resilience. It forces you to look beyond the external trappings of robes and rituals, to seek out the genuine heart of the Dharma, and to find your own path amidst the noise and confusion. Finally, the challenge of self-deception cannot be overlooked. Even you, a dedicated monk, were not immune to the subtle lures of ego, attachment, or despair. The harshness of the road, the isolation, the constant suffering, these could lead to a spiritual fatigue that might manifest as bitterness, cynicism, or a loss of purpose. Recognizing these internal hypocrisies within yourself and continually striving to purify your own mind was perhaps the ultimate struggle. The presence of external heretics and hypocrites served as a mirror, reflecting the ever-present need for vigilance in your own spiritual practice. The Silk Road wasn't just a test of your physical endurance. It was a profound crucible for your spiritual integrity, forcing you to confront the imperfections of others and, more importantly, your own. You've traversed vast deserts, scaled treacherous mountains, grappled with internal monastic politics, dodged bandits, and navigated the subtle perils of patronage and sectarian strife. You've copied countless sutras, battled loneliness, and faced down the disillusionment of human imperfection. As your journey nears its end, as the final grains of sand slip through the hourglass of your pilgrimage, you are left to ponder the legacy's lingering questions. What was it all for? What remains of your immense sacrifice? And how will it echo through time? You stand, perhaps, at a new monastery, one you helped establish, or one that now thrives because of the seeds you and countless others sowed. Or maybe you're simply looking back at the long, dusty road you traveled, the sheer physical effort, the constant gnawing hunger, the pervasive discomfort. These memories are etched into your bones. Did this suffering truly bring you closer to enlightenment, or was it merely an unavoidable crucible, a backdrop against which deeper spiritual struggles unfolded? This is a question that nags at the periphery of your mind, a quiet doubt that even years of practice cannot entirely dispel. Was the path of extreme asceticism truly the most efficient route, or just a testament to unwavering human will? Consider the vast distances you covered. You helped connect disparate cultures, weaving a spiritual thread across continents. But did the Dharma, as it spread, retain its purity? You witnessed the syncretism, the blending with local beliefs, the sometimes simplistic interpretations needed to reach new audiences. Did these adaptations dilute the original message, or were they necessary evolutions to ensure its survival? You grappled with the differing sects and their squabbles. Will these divisions continue, or will a unified understanding eventually emerge? Historians still debate the extent to which early Buddhist expansion on the Silk Road prioritized doctrinal purity versus pragmatic adaptation to local customs. And what of the individuals you encountered? The skeptical merchants, the curious villagers, the devout patrons, the fellow monks both pure and flawed. Did your presence, your quiet example, truly touch their lives? Did you plant seeds of compassion and wisdom that would blossom long after you were gone, or were you merely another passing figure on a busy trade route? A fleeting shadow quickly forgotten. The direct impact of your efforts is often invisible, unmeasurable, leaving you with only faith to believe in its efficacy. The very monasteries you relied upon, the centers of learning and refuge, face their own impermanence. You've seen some flourish, but others wither and disappear, swallowed by the desert sands or abandoned due to political shifts. Will the traditions you helped transmit endure for centuries, or are they fragile flowers, destined to fade? This awareness of the transient nature of even grand institutions can be sobering. reinforcing the core Buddhist teaching of anicca, but also leaving a sense of lingering uncertainty about the lasting impact of your life's work. Then there are the scriptures. You meticulously copied and helped translate them, preserving ancient wisdom for new generations. But will these texts be understood? Will future practitioners grasp the subtle nuances, the profound truths contained within their pages? Or will they too become subject to misinterpretation and sectarian divides? Your efforts were aimed at preserving the Dharma, but its future lies in the hands of those yet to come, a variable beyond your control. You can only trust that the seeds you planted will bear fruit. The sacrifices you made were immense. You gave up family, home, comfort, and safety. You embraced a life of poverty and perpetual movement. Was it worth it for your own liberation? Perhaps. But for the liberation of others, for the propagation of the Dharma, the answer remains elusive, a question whispered on the wind. The silence of the vast landscapes often holds these lingering doubts, forcing you to find peace not in tangible outcomes, but in the purity of your intention and the sincerity of your effort. And what of your own legacy? You, a single, humble monk, are unlikely to be remembered by name in grand histories. You will not have statues erected in your honor, nor grand stupas built over your remains. Your contribution is folded into the collective, part of the countless unnamed monks who walk these dusty roads, building bridges of faith with each weary step. Does this anonymity diminish your efforts, or does it heighten them, making your selflessness all the more profound? It forces you to find validation not in worldly recognition, but in the quiet satisfaction of having dedicated your life to something greater than yourself. Perhaps the most significant lingering question is about the true nature of enlightenment. After all the suffering, the study, the meditation, do you feel profoundly different? Have you truly transcended all attachment, all suffering? Or is it a continuous journey, a process that extends beyond this life, always just beyond the horizon? The answers are personal, deeply internal, and perhaps never fully articulated. The Silk Road monk's journey ends not with a definitive declaration of achievement, but often with the quiet understanding that the path continues, stretching into eternity, always demanding vigilance, always offering new insights. In the end, the legacy of being a Buddhist monk on the Silk Road isn't found in monumental achievements or personal glory. It's in the unseen threads of compassion, knowledge, and dedication woven into the fabric of history. It's in the quiet perseverance against overwhelming odds, the unwavering commitment to a truth that transcended the harsh realities of the physical world. It's a legacy of silent sacrifices and enduring faith, a testament to the fact that even the smallest, most anonymous step can contribute to a vast and timeless spiritual journey. Your journey through dusty deserts and icy mountains has come to an end. Let your mind wander to the last images of the Silk Road, the silent stone pagodas under the moonlight, the whispering prayers in the wind, and the tired but peaceful feeling in your heart. You have set foot on a path that few dare to travel, a path of sacrifice and search. Now, darkness falls, bringing with it silence. Close your eyes. Your breathing becomes deeper, slower, lulling you into a peaceful sleep. All burdens are gone. All worries have subsided. There is only silence and soft darkness,